The mother, there's a very innate relationship that the child has with the biological mother. Whatever the mother is giving, the child takes in completely. So Aahara has a very important aspect, in Shiksha. So unless a mother is educated, how would the mother actually, know what is the right thing to feed? Pranamaya Kosha, by Prana we mean is the vital energy. All kind of balas and the activity, Kriya Shilta, Kriya Shakti is developing at its peak during 6 to 10 years of age. The emotion coming, that is when the child gets exposed to the outer world, only exposed partially. So what happens at that time when the child is getting exposed, the job of the teachers and the job of the parents is to ensure they are channelizing the right things into the child. In the 16 to 20 years of age is where the Deshatana Paddhati takes precedence. It is complete experiential learning where you go to a place, not just learn about what is at that place. For example, if someone went to Mahakumbha in that age group, now 16 to 20 years, they would have grasped so many things, not just the fact that what is Mahakumbha, what is the Nakshatra state, and why do you take a dip.
Welcome to this very interesting and much needed conversation in Sangam Talks. Today's topic is dimensions of Gurukul education in the present day landscape. And today we have with us Anshu Dubey ji, the founder and president of Brahmavarcha's Education. Namaste, Anshu ji. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So before we begin this conversation, I would quickly like to introduce Anshu ji for the audience. Anshu Dubey is the founder and president of Brahmavarcha's Education, pioneering integration of Vedic wisdom, knowledge, and pedagogy with modern education and life through Brahmavarcha's knowledge portal. With over 20 years in IT and FinTech, she transitioned from leadership roles in digital payments and banking to a deep commitment to holistic education. Anshuji founded Brahmavarcha's Education as an offshoot of Sanskriti Arya Gurukulam, working as a bridge to bring Bharatiya and Shastriya knowledge, frameworks, sciences, and fundamental principles into contemporary learning, creating a seamless blend of ancient wisdom and modern learning methods. Today's topic on Gurukul education is a growing interest for Bharat, and we are also hoping that the future generation can be benefited from what the Gurukula Paddhati has to offer, and to highlight on some of the aspects, the various layers, the dimensions, and the relevance of this in today's time and age. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And to start this conversation, Anshuji, I would like to invite you to share what is Gurukula education and its relevance in today's time and age. Over to you.
I think that is something which usually, one of the things which I have observed by witnessing the Gurukul education system, as we call it, or the entire Pranali myself, is one of the first few learnings is that Atma Shlagha is a dosha. So essentially, raising the self, or talking too much about the self, or introducing oneself, is not a Bharatiya Pranali. That was an eye-opener for me. And having said that, now since we are in the modern times, we are in Kali Yuga, and the acceleration is very fast. And we are, even within our country, we are about 1.4 billion people. So the introductions become essential. So I humbly thank you for that. And along with that, I think, as I said, I introduced the Gurukul Shiksha, or the aspect or the concept of Gurukula. It is like a little challenging and a sad state to be in, that a number of people in Bharat currently do not know what is a Gurukul, or what was a Gurukul, or what the Gurukul Pranali is all about. So we have come to that stage from where, when we used to call ourselves the Vishwa Gurus, and we used to lead the world, and the most important aspect of that leadership was our knowledge. It is not that we used to call them in the modern times, a knowledge-based economy. Knowledge, or jnanam, was at the core of our existence. And we are a civilization which have been continuing for tens and thousands of years, right? We are actually fighting amongst ourselves on dating Ramayana and Mahabharata which is the oldest state, and do we have enough archaeological evidences for that or not or so. But in spite of that, even the Vedas, the core system of knowledge, as we call it, the oldest documentation of knowledge is something which is unarguably attributed to the Vedas from Bharat. And the four Vedas, so from the Vedic call, and the Vedas are called a Paurishaya, which is that is they've not been written or they've not been conceptualized by humans, but they have been heard. That is why they are called the Shruti, and they have been inherited. So that is something which has been continuing for tens of thousands of years. And right from that time, so the experience that we have gathered over that continuum of civilization, where a lot of other civilizations have actually vanished, they have perished, not because there was something wrong with them, but there is a certain kind of incompleteness. At the same time, the perseverance which is needed to continue a civilization is something which was broken by probably external factors. But Bharat, being one such civilization, being one such parampara, in spite of what we call the foreign invasions and the Western invasions, on our land as well as on our minds, we still have been able to continue with it. And that is the reason we are having such conversations, and we say that let's understand the Gurukula better, rather than saying what is actually a Gurukula. This word is something which you actually see being used by a lot of modern institutions as well, which itself is a proof that the word Gurukula has a certain stature to it. So when we talk of that word Gurukula, that itself actually tells you what this entire pranali was all about or is all about. Because when we say that we are a civilization which continues, so does the Guru Shishya Parampara, so does the Gurukul Parampara. Of course, it is not mainstream anymore, but at the core of it is the Guru Shishya Parampara, which actually keeps it going. And as the name suggests, Gurukula, it is the Kula of the Guru. So one who is the guru, the one who is a teacher, the one who is a margdarshak, the one who is a mentor, the one who is the father, that person's kula is actually the Gurukula. And what do we mean by the kula? Kula is essentially the place, the environment, the knowledge pool, everything that person, the guru, encompasses, that becomes the kula. And whosoever, for example, is a shishya or is a student to that particular guru or that acharya, who becomes part of that kula and actually imbibes and actually encompasses everything that is there in the kula of the guru. So that essentially is the word Gurukul, which is the kul of the guru. And that is something which we, in the modern times, we sometimes understand it only to be a discipline of academics, which is not the case. It is not really a discipline of academics. However, it is actually holistic shiksha or holistic education of life, where there is continuous development, ultimately going on to the point of what we call the moksha or the self-realization. Why is it so? Because there is this entire knowledge, as we call it, of the Bharatiya or the Vedic parampara, is that we are not a being with just one lifetime. We are a jiva. We, right from the Hiranyagarbha, which in the modern days, there is a partial theory of the Big Bang, which has come in, that from the Paramatma, when from the Hiranyagarbha, all the pieces, we are all pieces of the same Paramatma. We are the Jivatma. We have become smaller fractions spread across Brahmand, and not just one Brahmand or universe, but across multiple Brahmandas or multiverses. And then each jiva or each jivatma is actually a part of the Paramatma. So that is the knowledge or that understanding is at the core of the Bharatiya Shiksha or the Gurukul Pranali as well. And I would stick to these terms. I would stick to these Sanskrit or the Bharatiya terms because, and it is deliberate that I will stick to them. The reason for that is that in the modern times, there is a need for us to be global or to be connected in a way where we have forgotten our old languages. We need a mode of common communication. For that, we have adopted English currently, which has also become the medium of teaching, medium of learning, medium of communication for us. But it is a very limiting language, especially if you compare it with Sanskrit or with the Bharatiya Bhashas. Because in Bharatiya languages rather, Sanskrit being the Mula, where the meaning of the word is in the word itself. It becomes very encompassing, just like we spoke about Gurukula. Similarly, all the words have a meaning and they don't really have a one-to-one mapping in English. So when we try and explain that word in English, it so happens that we lose the meaning of that. So that's the reason I would stick to calling it the Gurukul Shiksha Paddhati or the Gurukul Shiksha Pranali. And when we say it's the Gurukul Shiksha Paddhati, there is a word called Shiksha, which comes into that. So that word Shiksha, one, it does not translate to the word education, one-on-one. So that's like a superset. Shiksha is a superset and education is a subset to it. And even education, now if you look up the meaning now in any of the modern dictionaries, where even the meaning keeps changing. So the Oxford dictionary or the Oxford meaning, which used to be there 100 years back, has now changed. So even the meaning of the words change because that is a derived meaning. It is not essentially the meaning of the word. So as such, the word education, because English is also something which has come up like, it has taken in from a lot of old or the root languages, and then it has a kind of, created as vocabulary. So the word education has actually come from the Latin word educere, and which means to draw out. So the original meaning, when the word education was encompassed in English dictionary or English vocabulary, its meaning was to draw out the innate qualities of a human or a student. So that is, so to educate means to draw out the innate qualities. And that essentially is shiksha, the concept of shiksha itself. Going back to what I just explained that, from the Paramatma, all the Jivatmas come in. So they all carry that jnanam, they all carry that memory. And across various lifetimes, we accumulate jnana, we accumulate knowledge, and the next life is actually a continuity, is a continuum from the previous life. So along with the Atman, you also carry the Mana, the Buddhi, the Smriti, the Sanskaras, which actually carry with the Jeev from one body to the other. And that is the reason when we say Shiksha is to draw out, that it is actually supposed to bring it out, something which is already part of that Jiva. But that Shiksha is not something which is actually restricted to academics. And that is why Gurukul is not something which is restricted to academic studies only. So essentially, at the heart of it, when we say what is the Bharatiya Gyan Pranali, now there is a word which has come up in the last few years. Is because of a initiative which the government of India has started, the Ministry of Education has started. It is called IKS, or the Indian Knowledge Systems. Now that again, going back to the fact that English is a very limiting language and sometimes it even misleads. So instead of calling it the Indian knowledge systems, we prefer calling it either the Bharatiya Gyan Parampara or the Bharatiya Gyan Pranali. Similarly, the Gurukul Shiksha or the Gurukul system is also something which we refer to as the Gurukul Shiksha Paddhati. Now, at the core of it, there are actually, two very important components. The first component is when we talk of our civilizational continuity, our civilizational continuity of knowledge, it is the continuous, unbroken Guru Shishya Parampara, where the knowledge is passed on from a guru, from a learned person to the Shishya, and then that Shishya becomes the Guru of, of the next generation, of the next Shishya, the next Jigyasu, and so on and so forth. And that is the reason that right from the time when the Vedas were heard, the Shrutis were heard, or they were accepted by our rishis, they were seen by our rishis and passed on, they have been passed on even till now after tens and thousands of years. So that is essentially the Guru Shishya Parampara, which is at the core of the Gurukula, where the word Guru itself, if you look at the word Guru, which has a very encompassing meaning, one of the primary meanings is, as we normally understand, is the one who teaches, the one who mentors. And essentially it also, if you look at the Shastriya meaning of it, it is the father. And that is the reason the Kula of the Guru, or the Kula of the Rishi, is something that we accept as our personality. The other aspect is that when we say that it is a Gurukula, when we talk of the continuous Guru Shishya Parampara, we talk of the Guru Shishya Parampara and the word Gurukula. Guru is someone who is actually the all-encompassing center in this entire pranali, in this entire paddhati. And when the Shishya, or when a student, or when a Jigyasu enters the Kula of the Gurukul, whatever the guru has, whatever the guru knows, that is actually passed on to the shishya through experiential learning. So everything which is very anubhavatmak. So you don't just learn something out of a book. You don't just, pass on a concept, by way of verbally passing on a concept, but there is a certain method to it. There is a certain pranali to it. There's a certain science to it by which this learning, all that knowledge is converted into experiential learning, and that is something which is passed on. So these are the two things when they put together. It is a very holistic pedagogy on how a person is actually made knowledgeable right from zero. Number one, not everyone, no one is actually starting at zero.
Yeah.
There's a human life that we are starting. So even if it
Mm.
is the very first time a person is being born as a human, there is still certain knowledge, there's certain things that the jiva is carrying. So basically, drawing out all that jnanam, that experiential knowledge, how to do that, how to develop a person, how to invoke that entire jnanam, how to draw that jnana out. There is a certain method to it. Under what disciplines, or under what vidyas, what are the areas under which that knowledge would come out, is something which becomes an entire pedagogy, and that is what we call the Gurukul Jnana Pranali. And when we talk of the word shiksha, shiksha does not only mean academics or the subjects. So essentially, we can look at it as having four components. The very first and the most important, and something which is at the root of the Gurukula system or the Gurukula Paddhati, is the Sahaj Shiksha, a shiksha which is done informally. And
Mm.
for that, the biggest guru is in the Gurukula, because the Gurukula encompasses of the guru as well as the Guru Patni.
Yeah.
It is a unit. So it is the mata, it is the mother who actually is the biggest or the best teacher. Now, why has the mother has been given that particular stature or that particular level in the Bharatiya Gyan Vidha, is because the education or the biggest gurukul for any jiva is actually the garbha. So
Mm.
actually, the teaching or the learning of a jiva starts from the time the jiva enters the garb of the mother. So
Wow.
that is why whatever is taught, and that is the biggest university
Mm.
of the world. We talk of in the modern system, the university actually starts after the age of 17 or so, when a child passes out about 12 years in the what you call the schooling system. But actually, the university, the true university, if you look at the nature and the cosmic laws, it is the womb of the mother. Because at that time, there are a lot of external factors or the influence, the outside influences which are not available. So at that time, whatever is passed on to the jiva is something which becomes an adi ballu pravutti, which essentially means that something which carries on for life, and the person and the jiva is born with that in that particular
Mm.
lifetime. And we have some very glaring examples of that which prove that aspect of it. Abhimanyu, we all know, right? We all know the
Yes.
story of Abhimanyu. You being a storyteller yourself, Srihariji,
Yeah.
I'm sure that is a story which is amongst the one of the favorite stories of whatever might be the age of children. I'm sure that is a character that that uh, uh, the students or the children get drawn to. So a teenager would be equally interested in Abhimanyu, because Abhimanyu was that age when he entered the Chakravyuh in the war of
Mm.
Mahabharata. At the same time, a small kid who's probably 5 years, who doesn't even, cannot even comprehend the aspect of war and what exactly all this. But
Yeah.
that Abhimanyu is something what he learned, and that's something that we find in Mahabharata. He learned it in the Garbha. We know of Ashtavakra. We know of
Mm.
of so many aspects of a mother being the first guru, and the example of Madalasa, that we know, the Madalasa's lori or her lullaby is the one which is something only by singing the lullabies is when she gave the entire knowledge of Adhyatma to her infant child, who from an anatomy and physiology perspective, even from an Ayurveda perspective, the kosha, though the Vijnanamaya kosha was not developed, still the child actually encompassed all of that adhyatma, the knowledge of the yoga, and then actually moved on to a life of higher meaning. And to more recent times, we talk of everyone talks of Shivaji, right? Recently, this
Yes.
movie Chhava is doing rounds. So Chhava, of course, Sambhaji is is the son of Shivaji, and Shivaji is one, he's an unmatched hero of
Yeah.
Bharat. Rightly so. But we talk of Shivaji so often, and one thing which a number of people, for some, not really any, deliberately, but they seem to kind of forget that what made Shivaji Shivaji was Jijabai.
Yeah.
It is the mother she was the biggest guru. She was the one who has taught her almost everything,
Mm.
if you really call it so. So if you go, I will not really recite the shloka from that perspective, but what our Shastra says, that one Acharya, one father is worth 100 Acharyas.
Mm.
The mother is worth 1,000 fathers. So that is the degree of Gurutva, or the aspect of being a guru to the child. That is the situation, or that is the position of a mother, and that is in the Gurukula system. So that is why it used to be, and it is still the fact in our Shastras, that the woman has to be most educated. She has to be a Vidushi, because she has to actually bring up the next generation.
Yeah.
So it is the Sahaj Shiksha, the Shiksha that is, so the entire Arthashastra, maths, as well as complex subject like cosmology or the Nakshatra Vidya, Jyotish, Khagol Vigyan, all that was something which used to be taught by the mothers to the children, even by the
Oh.
time they used to reach the age of 5 or 6 years, by the time the Upanayan Sanskars used to happen. So Sahaj Shiksha, and even when the child actually enters the Gurukula, goes in for a more formal set of kind of getting knowledge under disciplines, even at that time, the atmosphere, the environment is something which is a very encompassing or a very important aspect of Gurukul Shikshan Paddhati, where the shikshan is given in a very sahaj way. So it is not that, okay, there's going to be a classroom, everyone is supposed to get, in a nice uniform, come and sit for 45 minutes. There'll be a teacher who will come in, all the students are supposed to come and sit, and then, get knowledge about one particular topic, and, then everyone goes home. It doesn't happen like that in the Gurukula. For example, since the acharyas are the shikshak as well as the student, the teacher and the student both stay in the Gurukula,
Yeah.
that teaching, that shiksha can happen anytime, and it does happen anytime. And that is
Mm.
something I can even tell from personal experience also. When I stayed in Sanskritari Gurukulam, I was an Antavasi for 3 years. And
Mm.
that is when so we used to, so all the girls and the acharya or the lady teacher, they stay in one room, and the upacharyas or the male teachers, they stay with the in the same room with the kumaras. So while before going to bed, is a lot of times when I used to kind of do revisions or ask them some question about some concept that might have been taught to them or might have been told to them at any other point in time. So the child is, unless the child really has understood and has actually imbibed that particular concept, the student would not be able to answer that.
Mm.
And that is one very effective way of Sahaj Shiksha, that whatever is given by way of Sahaj Shiksha, or let's say when there is a story while we are, let's say we are sharing in the room, or while we are doing some kitchen activity, is something which stays with the student for life. And that is the impact of Sahaj Shiksha, that is the impact of Paroksha Shiksha. Similarly, just like we talk of Sahaj Shiksha, we talk of the Gurukul Shiksha, which is a more disciplined way of getting in deeper into subjects and getting deeper into disciplines. That is where the framework, the Bharatiya framework, has, broadly speaking, 14 disciplines or 14 Vidyas and 64 arts. So something which is actually related to life are the Vidyas, or the 14 Vidyas. Something which is related to the livelihood is the
Ah, beautiful.
skills, or the 64 arts. And under those 64 arts, there are a lot of things which are very specialized subjects in the modern education. But essentially, if you look at those 64 arts, for example, metallurgy is part of the 64 arts. And the 14 disciplines and the 14 Vidyas that we call them, they are even far above the arts. They are considered far above the arts. So imagine the level or the standard of sophistication of knowledge that we maintain, or that the Gurukula Paddhati used to maintain. So that is
Mm.
the Gurukul Shiksha way. And then comes a very, very important aspect, something which is absolutely absent in the current times, that we find in the modern education system, and something which is part and parcel, which is at the core of the Gurukul Paddhati, is what we call the Jivana Shiksha, or the Jivan Upyogi Shiksha. So, Ayurveda, for example, which is, we call it the science of life. It is not something which is taught as, out of the 14 disciplines, out of the 14 Vidyas. Ayurveda is part of Jivan Shiksha. And 50% of our Ayurveda, especially for a girl or for a woman, is taught in the kitchen. So what is actually essentially, what is it that you need for your Jivan is your Aahara, is your food. Food is a very elaborate science. And you learn that science which is needed to keep yourself alive, to keep yourself healthy, is what you learn in the kitchen. That's not something you learn in the classroom. So that is a very, very, different aspect of perspective, which we talk of Shiksha. And I'll give a very small example, Shri Hariji, of when we're talking about the Sahaj Shiksha and Jivan Shiksha, and how does the role of a woman comes into picture. Now, maths is something that how do we start teaching maths nowadays? That we, sit with the child, or we tell, we say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
We show the symbols to the child, and then we start. That is how we introduce it to a child. And then we kind of, say, okay, fine, either by way of a poem or something, we say, okay, fine, learn it. So we try to bring, certain nice poems around it. That is our modern way of teaching counting to children. Versus a mother, when she is actually working in the kitchen, let's say she's sitting to cut the vegetables. Let's say she's got like a bowl of brinjals with her. And that is the time when the child is also sitting with her or is playing with her in the kitchen. That is the time is when she teaches counting by way of actually taking the brinjals. Okay, fine, can you get me that brinjal? Can you get me one brinjal from there? Okay, get me one more. So at the same time, while you are teaching the counting, you're also teaching addition. Okay, so get me one more. Okay, so now, okay, fine. So that is what is Sahaj Shiksha. That is what is Jivan Shiksha. When you cut it, when you put it into multiple pieces, when you multiply it, all that maths education used to happen in the kitchen. It still happens in kitchen, where you see, for example, we say, we have this movement at the government level to have 100% literacy, or rather we say we have to make education reach everyone. It is even in what we call in the modern terms the illiterate homes or the families. That is where this is how the mother teaches. If you ever visited a vegetable vendor, is that's when you say, if there is if the kid of the vegetable vendor is sitting alongside, now whether it is a lady vendor or it is a male vendor, that child would be so good at maths. Immediately counting, weighing, ensuring that whether there's a right balance or not, count, certain things, doing the mathematics. If you, hand over certain, like a currency note or denomination note to the kid, it'll immediately calculate, it'll do a mental calculation, do a verbal calculation of how many, for example, out of a note of 100, how much is the, vegetables for, how much is supposed to actually. So he does all that, subtraction, that addition, that multiplication, all in the head, does it very quickly, and is still illiterate, or at least has been taught by an illiterate mother. So that exactly the idea is that we are confusing literacy with education. That is one aspect of it, and that is where there is a very clear, simple clarity. There's a absolute spashtata in the Gurukul way of things, is that what is a shiksha is what is saksharta. And the focus is on shiksha. So similarly, the other thing is, I think you'd be able to see there's a backdrop that I have here.
Yes.
And this is like a whole story. So this is being done by, this is actually the tribal art of Maharashtra. It's called Varli. So this has been done by someone who've been, from generations, they are artists, they are Varli artists. So when this was supposed to be done, this is a big area, as you can see. So so the artist did ask me, and the artist came with a niece. She was about 15, 16 years of age. And he asked, what is that you want made here? So I said, apart from the things that you traditionally make, is it possible for you to make a Gurukul? Because, I'm associated with Gurukul, so we need to kind of make a Gurukul. And I did not tell him anything beyond that. I simply said, I would like to, if you can make a Gurukul. Said, what do you want? I said, no, you do it your way. And what he came up with this is that there is a guru sitting under the tree of knowledge. The guru is sitting on an asan, is sitting in a pose in front of the guru. So the entire Gurukula, the scene, he drew on his own. He is per se an illiterate person. But he knows what a Gurukul is. And, that's what everyone goes to get education. Even I got my education from my father. I got this training from my father. And there in front of the Guru, there are some who are sitting with a book. You might not be able to see it very closely, but there are some who are sitting with a book.
Yes.
There are some who are coming with a japamala. There are some who are coming with food. There's someone who's coming with a bag. There's a mother who's coming with a small child. There are people who are coming in from across the river. And then there's a modern improvisation he has done. There are also a couple of people who are sitting with a laptop because he could say,
Ah,
"Oh, fine, so you do online things." I said, "Yes, I do online." "You do things on computer?" He asked me. I said, "Yes, I do things on computer." And that's where he drew a couple of them. That's an improvisation. So
hmm.
computer, for example, is not an object in the worldly art set of things, but he
Yes.
did make one. And when in 2 hours down the line, he said, "Do you think it is the right interpretation?" I said, "How do you know?" He said, that's how the Gurukul is. Gurukul aisa hi to hota hai.
Beautiful.
So you see, this is the civilizational knowledge. This is the Sahaj
Hmm.
Shiksha we're talking about. And along with him, the 15-year-old niece, of course, she was helping, him with the finer details and filling in the colors and everything. And she was listening into the conversation. And she also asked, I could hear when she was asking him, okay, why is this? Okay, what are they doing? So she's also learning what a Gurukul is from actually a guru who's if you talk from a Hindi perspective, it was his chacha, it was his kaka. So the guy was his that girl's father's younger brother,
Hmm.
the artist. So she was asking Kaka, so what is it? What are they doing? Why is this like that? And for example, a very important inherent aspect, what he learned from his father, and the unbroken parampara that I'm talking about, the knowledge that I'm talking about, the male character, the male figure sit differently, and the female figure sit differently. In the
Okay.
Shastriya way, in the Ayurveda way, for example, what you call squatting, or in a Sukhasan pose, that is how the Purusha sits, and the lady sits with the 1 feet up. Or like
Hmm.
we would have seen even our deities, like when they sit with the one foot is folded and the other one is relaxed, either on the
Yeah.
ground or it is folded up. So this is a civilizational Shastriya knowledge which has been coming in from the Jivan Shiksha, from the Sahaj Shiksha way, and that has now been passed on to the next generation, who is the niece, who will also carry and also imbibe in her memory as well as in her work. And at the same time also learned an art, of course, which gives them a jivika, which gives them a livelihood as well. So this is the beauty of the Gurukula Pranali. And then the very important aspect of what we call the Samaj Shiksha, which essentially is co-living, is the Kutumba, is
Hmm.
the family system that we have. And along with that, in that family system, encompassed in the Gurukula Paddhati, is the Shodash Sanskaras, or the 16 Sanskaras, which are part of a human life. So the very first sanskara is the Garbhadhan sanskar. So even to conceive, when the jiva actually comes in contact, or when the jiva actually starts a life on this Prithvi Loka, that is a sanskar. And the
Hmm.
last one, what we call, is the Antyeshti sanskar, or the Antim sanskar, which is the Daha sanskar. So the entire life is actually built in this Samaj Shiksha, and all these are actually transformational phases. All
Hmm.
this is not exclusive of Shiksha. This is not exclusive of academics. Academics is only one part of the Gurukula Shiksha. So that is how the entire Gurukul, the system, or the Shiksha, the Gyan Pranali works. One is academics. Two is the method by which any kind of training or any kind of knowledge is passed on, which is the Sahaj Shiksha way, which is in a very informal way. But at the same time, there are values and there are sanskaras which are inculcated, and there are practical tools. These are all experiential learnings which are actually used to imbibe those values, to imbibe those sanskaras into a person by being in the kula, by being in close proximity of the guru. And the ultimate close proximity of the guru is what is called an upavasa. So
Um,
upavas is not, again, coming back to that limitation of English language. We translate upavasa to fasting, which is essentially not
yes.
eating food, or probably eating a certain kind of food, or leaving certain kind of food. But
Hmm.
essentially upavasa means sitting close to the guru. So even by being in the Gurukula, it is not that all the time that the guru is teaching you.
Yeah.
There's something what we see in the modern education system, that the teacher comes into the proximity, or the teacher comes in only to teach the child, and after that they go away after their lecture is over.
Yeah.
So the guru, the shishya is very much in the Gurukula, but at the same
Hmm.
time, when he or she is sitting in very close proximity, that is when he or she is taking the jnanam, is when is called the upavasa. And now there are very few, there are very small windows or rare opportunities when you get to do that. So what essentially happens, if you are happen to sit with the guru, you really forget everything else, or you say everything else can take a back seat. For food, oh no, I don't want to have food now because I've only got Guruji's time right now. So you happen to give away your food, you happen to give away your probably your daily sport or whatever, or something else which was probably either a mundane task or something which you do regularly. So no, that is not important, because what is most important, I have got Guruji's proximity. So let me sit and learn. And that is the perspective of Upavasa, which now we only, the only part which is left is the non-eating part of it. Rest of the things have
Yeah.
kind of taken a backseat. So this is how essentially the entire, the Gurukul Shiksha Pranali kind of works, and it encompasses Shiksha. That's how it imparts Shiksha. There's a long answer to your question. I'm sorry, Jay, but I think it is such a vast area that it is important for us to understand what actually lies inside that.
Thank you so much, Anshu ji, for sharing the scope of this, to lay down all the aspects of this. Because what really stayed with me as you were sharing is the understanding of the fact that it's drawing out what is innately available, inherently there in the child, and it's a continuity. It's not like the child is starting with a blank state. There is something that the child is inheriting from previous births, and this to me is what is the unique, rather the cornerstone of what we call the Bharatiya Shiksha Paddhati, because that is what informs then our the whole method, the pedagogy, all our practices, isn't it? And the four categories that you mentioned, the sikshas, also was very, very interesting to see, especially the knowledge for life, knowledge for livelihood. All these things made it very easy for me, or even for, I'm sure, for somebody who's getting introduced to what Gurukula Paddhati is, will easily be able to make sense of what it is. Yeah. But beyond this, also, what are some really, tangible differences between, a modern contemporary education system and the Gurukula, Shiksha? Yes, you said that the children and the guru stay together. The whole relationship is completely different to what we see today between a teacher and a student. But apart from that, in terms of textbooks, delivery of the teaching, also in terms of the schedules, holidays, some of these aspects also, if you can bring up, it will be very interesting to know.
Certainly, and I think that is something which actually draws a very clear line of distinction
Mm,
between what we call the modern education system and the Gurukula Paddhati. As it's something that we touched upon, it is seem to be restricted to academics,
mm,
versus the Gurukula system is not restricted to academics or what we call the theoretical knowledge. It is
mm,
all experiential. And when we say it is all experiential, how do we decide that it is that, it is that, what is the sequence? How
mm,
does it matter? Like, for example, in the modern system, it is like a one size fit all approach, as we call it.
mm.
So everyone who's at, let's say, 5 years of age is when the child becomes eligible to start on with what we call the primary education.
Yes.
So even, and that there is an academic session. So one, the very big difference is the start and end of a particular subject's learning. That's a very fundamental difference between the modern and the Gurukula education systems. So for example, at least in Bharat, from April 1st every year is when the new session, academic
Mm,
session starts, and it ends at the next year, 31st March. That is, so everyone, whosoever is, and the admissions for that actually start a year before that, let's say about September or October or so. So there is a certain date by which, if the child has not reached 5 years of age, the child does not become eligible to start with what you call the primary education or class 1.
mm,
Now imagine a situation where, on let's say on 28th, the child is not eligible because the child has not completed 5 years of age.
mm.
And
Yeah.
on, the child actually rather, goes home, falls sick, there's a changing weather, is really bedridden for 4 days, rather loses a lot of energy and everything, and then goes back to the same school, let's say on 2nd of the next month. At that time, the child has actually become 5 years of age, and now the child becomes eligible. So actually speaking, in those last 5 days, he would have lost certain energy, he would have lost certain balas, but that person becomes eligible just because that is the physical biological age. And that is a fundamental difference, something that we were talking about, that a child is actually, it is not one size fit all, because not every child is the same. Not everyone is starting the journey from zero. When a child is born, that is how the biological, basically the idea is that one is to start with a biological age.
Right.
So, when a child is born, that is when the child is considered 0 day or 1 day old, and so on and so forth. That's how it progresses. So everyone who is at 5 years of biological age is considered to be at the same level of intelligence and all the other qualities, that are expected in a child. Versus that is where the Gurukula system or the Gurukula Paddhati actually differentiates. It is not the case, right? So some exceptions that we see, for example, we call them the prodigies. They are very, very clearly visible. Where at a very small age is when they demonstrate certain features. They say, oh, the child is highly talented. But if you really go back, now the Bharatiya Vidha actually goes on to find out the reasons for that. Now the reasons for that is that is something that there's a memory that they are carrying actually, that is a sanskara they are actually carrying in from their Purva Janma. That is the reason the journey in this lifetime starts after that. So though physically they might be two kids, in fact, for that matter, even twins born who are exactly the same age, just a few minutes apart, but one might turn out to be a prodigy, or one might have an interest in something,
Yeah.
or might be very good at something at 5 years, versus the other is not. Secondly, the pace at which everyone learns. And that again also goes back to how the bandharan, happens of a child. There's a lot of things we actually go inside, during pregnancy as well. So the learning speed of every child is not the same. But in the modern one, what is the expectation that everyone starts at the same time and everyone ends at the same time? So the intention is not to ensure that the child actually understands or imbibes whatever is being taught, but everyone has to work at the same pace. Versus in the Gurukula system, or what we call the Gurukul way of education, is that when a child is able to learn and actually imbibe some particular concept or some particular subject, is when the learning of that particular subject for that child stops and the next topic starts. There's a very fundamental difference. So, and why does it so happen? Because there is a difference between what we call creation and production.
Right.
So because we have to cater in the modern times, we say we have to cater to so many people, we have to educate. And I'm doing quote unquote. We have to educate so many children and so many people because there is rampant illiteracy. Because we have been, we've had so many invasions and everything else. Always blame it on the invasions.
Yeah.
Of course, yes, that is something which has disturbed, which has actually ruined our systems very, very badly, all our vyavasthas. But at the same time, whatever is in our hands is in our hands. That's a different debate, I think, a different topic for some other day on why we are not doing things we should be doing. But that is the idea, because you have to serve so many of the people. You work in a factory mode, in a assembly line, a production mode. So you want to produce X number of graduates in a year. Every school has to produce so many people who pass out from that, from their school. That is how it has been made. The learning span has been made the same for everyone. Versus, since there is no cutoff, that if you start learning this subject, something as simple as, for example, algebra, one child might learn that in 2 days, one child might do it in 2 weeks, the third one might do it in 2 months, the fourth one might not even do it at all. And we have, for example, even in Sanskriti Arya Gurukulam, we have these two very, different personality kids. There's one who's kind of a born mathematician. He's like so quick with maths. We can't stop. So the Acharya is not supposed to do that. But since we have also been brought up in the modern education system, we kind of have this anticipation. Oh, you know what? He's going to be a mathematician. Versus the other one who still cannot remember the table of 18 as of now. They both started at the same time. So maths is that person's forte, the other one is not that person's forte. So that one size fit all, the primary differentiator is, and again, every child is taught the same thing at the same pace for the same amount of duration, is one size fit all. That is the production, because we want to say that X number of children passed out class 5, class 10, or whatever, versus in the Gurukula system, it is not the case. Second, and the most important aspect is a very something that we spoke about. We were talking about the previous slide or question, is what we call the the studies which actually focus on life. So let's say in the current, we have history, geography, and civics, which are being taught in the modern, periphery in the modern system. There when we teach about Itihasa, we also teach about the Itihasa of America. We also teach about, the geography of, let's say, Nile River. For example, who actually climbed Everest for the first time? What is the height of Everest to a person who's living in a coastal area of, let's say, Tamil Nadu or Kerala? But we would not teach the Itihasa of Kerala. We would not teach the geography of Kerala, where the person is, where in all probability, the person might continue to have a livelihood later. That is something which will not be taught to the child. That is again another fundamental difference, that the vichara of desh kal paristiti avastha, that is something which is present in the Gurukul system, which is something which is not present in the modern system. So you universally teach everything to everyone, irrespective of whether it is relevant for them or not. And that is the reason you tend to forget whatever you are not, is not relevant to you. You tend to forget it. So, but that will keep me occupied. That will keep a child occupied, because the child will have to learn it. The child will have to appear for an exam for it, versus something that he or she might forget even just 2 months down the line. As against that, for example, if there is a fisherman community, if there are, who are children, who are from that community, if they are taught about the kind of soils which are there, which are present, in that particular area, in the coastal area, how the soil close to the sea is different from the soil which is close to a river. That is rather a more important geographical component that needs to be taught to that child. And when we talk of the Gurukula experiential learning, that is something that that a child is actually taught. There's another fundamental difference. Third, and a very important, because we are talking about the differences, and then I'll talk about the most crucial feature of the Gurukula system. So that third difference, and the most damaging one, which we see currently rampant, is the assessment system. How a child is assessed for what he or she would have learned after a particular, this thing is taught to a child. Here, what happens in the modern scenario, that at the end of either a session, it is not when the subject is taught. It is at the end of a particular period of a session, is when there is a verbal or a written test or something which is taken. There is a paper which is taken. There is a number system. There is a marking system, which is also very unscientific, by the way. That is something which is used to determine whether the child has learned something or not. And then you have a passing criteria. Right? Out of, let's say, if there's 100 marks, out of that 33, if a child scores 33, then the child is considered passed. But does the child really has imbibed that particular subject, the knowledge of that particular subject? 33, and that is, if you only look at from the modern perspective also, that something which was supposed to be worth 100, the person only knows 33% of it. And still we say the person is learned. Why? Because that is a passing criteria. Secondly, except for maths, which is a very objective subject per se, there is everything else actually depends on the invigilator, the one who is actually marking or assessing the questions. Two people, since two people are not the same, no two people are the same, they would not really assess it similarly. So to the same question, one invigilator might assign, let's say, 10 marks, the other one might assign 5 marks. So essentially, when in the bigger system, because you have to look at a production of so many children who are supposed to pass or who are supposed to be assessed, this is a kind of a shallow, unscientific way which is used. Versus in the Gurukula, it is a very foolproof and a very spasht way of assessing. When a student is able to teach that particular subject or that particular topic to someone else, is when it is understood that the person has actually imbibed it. That is one way. Second, and it also has some other positive repercussions and side effects. Secondly, the most important aspect again of the Gurukul Paddhati is that essentially every student or every person becomes a teacher as well, or gets trained to become a teacher. And that is something which actually encompasses or that spreads across the Sahaj Shiksha part of it. So you really need not have so many schools which need to accommodate 2,000 children, 4,000 children, 5,000 children, because every single child who is passing out of the Gurukul is a working teacher, himself or herself is a working institution. So they are capable of teaching their own children, their own kula very well. At least the entire primary education is there something that they can teach and they are capable of teaching. The second assessment which happens does not happen at the level of academics. Something which is completely missing from the modern system is assessing the person for the assessing the personality. You only check the short-term memory of a child by way of modern assessments. Versus, I'll give you an example for that. You might have heard of Acharya, who's called the Vaidya of Kali Yuga. So there are some primary Vedyas who have happened across the 4 yugas. So Charak is called the Vaidya of the Treta Yuga. Sushruta is called the Vaidya of the Dwapar Yuga. And then Jivakacharya is called the Vaidya of the Kali Yuga. So Jivakacharya, what? No, I'm sorry. It is not it's not Jivakacharya. It is actually Nagarjuna who had this very famous way of or Paddhati of assessment is assessing his students. So Nagarjuna is the one who has kind of, if you talk in modern terms, you have a generation 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. So the Ayurveda 3.0, when this entire alchemy got completely developed, which is when the Bhasma Shastra, the Bhasma, from the metal or the metallurgy aspect, the alchemy actually came forward. Nagarjuna is called the father of alchemy. So what he used to do at the end of, when a child used to, or when a student used to kind of complete his studies in his Gurukula, is he used to send the student to the village to actually serve the people, go and do a camp and, do a chikitsa and nidanam for everyone. And what he used to do in the marga, on the way, when the person is supposed to pass through the jungle, because, of course, that time we did not have these multinational highways and everything. So he used to actually throw, thorns and pebbles and, basically those sharp pebbles in the, in the way. So if there is a student who used to walk past them, that student used to fail in the assessment. Used to say you're supposed to spend more time in the Gurukula, still study, do and so. If there is a student who used to kind of, walk on top of it, did not used to bother, and then used to get hurt, used to be disqualified from the Gurukula. And then the one who used to actually used to actually take on all those things, clear the path, put them on the side so that it does not even hurt anyone else. That child or that student was kind of, passed to actually go on and then kind of, start serving this thing. What is the fundamental behind that? First one, the one who used to kind of walk on top of it is so much, out of his mind. After spending so much time, the person is still lost. He or she is not capable of being a Vaidya because the Vaidya is supposed to have very sukshma avalokan. His observation power is supposed to be very acute. If the person is so ignorant, they are not fit to be a Vaidya. So they should leave that profession, leave that line of education itself completely, in spite of having spent so many days, so many years in the Gurukula. The one who used to kind of, walk past them used to still has to come up with the fact that the seva bhava, the vaidya, shiksha and chikitsa, education and health or other medicinal treatment are two things which are not supposed to be associated with money. They are not supposed to be professions which are supposed to be a livelihood professions. These are not professions. These are the, what you call the creation pillars of the society. So they are not supposed to be not thinking about others. So if a Vaidya who's actually supposed to be saving someone's life is, saving his own life and then walking past the problems, that person would really not be able to provide solutions to the problem. So that person needs to further hone his skills. And so you come back, you would go and expose yourself to the public once you kind of, further furnish yourself. And then the third one who used to kind of actually put everything aside, see, yeah, this person is thinking about others. So that person is always going to look for solutions. So that is kind of one very important aspect. This then is an all-encompassing aspect is that what we call the holistic development, the word that we use very often these days, is what is called the Panchakoshatmak Vikas. There is a Panchakosha framework of
Hmm.
Bharat, Bharatiya Shiksha, which talks about 5 sheaths or layers on top of the Atman. And every sheath has a role to play in our existence. There are certain aspects of our existence which actually stay or which get stored in each of these koshas, and there is a developmental stage for all of them, and there are methods to enhance each of the koshas. So the Gurukul Paddhati is actually something which is focusing on all of the 5 koshas, versus that's not something what the modern education do. For example, from birth to 5 years of age, it is the Annamaya Kosha, it is the body, which is the stool body, and all the organs inside it, which develop the most. So at that time, what has to be the focus, even when it comes to education, or it comes to bringing up or the child or the shiksha of the child? What needs to be done? Everything has to focus, has to happen according to the Annamaya Kosha. Then it is the Pranamaya Kosha, which is the energy or the vital energy of the bala of the body. How it is supposed to be done, what is happening in the modern system is very, contrary to that, what needs to rather go into the developmental aspect of it. Then it is the Manomaya Kosha, which is the mind, where there is a certain age when it develops the fastest and the most, which is 11 to 15 years. And accordingly, the subjects are introduced. Accordingly, the practices are introduced. Accordingly, the methods of teaching are changed
Hmm.
as per the developmental stage of the child. Similarly, the intellect actually starts developing, or the Vijnanamaya Kosha starts developing the most, from the age of 16 to 20 years. If you recollect, if you go back to this aspect of the Veda Dhyana, Veda part starts early, but the Veda
Hmm.
Adhyayan actually starts after the age of 14 years or 15 years. Why is it so? Because actually there's the Vijnanamaya Kosha, which develops the most, or the Tarka or the discretion actually starts developing the fastest after that. And that is the time the food that you are supposed to give to that body. So if you really call them 5 levels of the body, you're supposed to give food to all 5 levels.
All.
So
Hmm.
if you do not give that food at those 5 levels at the right time, that is when the development does not happen. That is something which is completely missing from the modern education system. So if I really have to sum it up, if I'll say that the aim of education, or if aim of the Shiksha, there are these 6 components to it. One, of course, is the development, which is development by way of knowledge, the development of not just the body, but of the mind, of the intellect, of the spiritual aspect. Livelihood, what is, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to use the skills so that you can earn a livelihood for yourself. What is the culture? What is, the person has to become holistically developed at an individual level as well as at a social level, something which we, again see missing. We can talk about that. And values, the dharma and the ethics, as we call it. By dharma, we do not mean the religion part of it, again, a limiting word. But what we
Hmm.
call as the dharma is the innate duty or the responsibility of a human towards self, towards others, towards family, towards everything, is something which is called dharma. Bharat, or the Gurukul Shiksha Pranali, is the only one which has given us tools to develop those values, to develop those sanskaras, something which is missing in the modern system. And most importantly, which is what we call the self-realization, or sa vidyaya vimuktaye, where
Hmm.
the mukti or the liberation is not really the moksha part of it, but by way of knowledge, you actually free yourself, you liberate yourself from the limitations that you face in your development. So in these, if you look at these 6 aspects of education, or these 6 aims of education, you can very well put the modern education system and see where all it is succeeding, where all it is failing. The reason we see the society in such a particular shape at this point in time is because that is something which is lacking, even for something as simple as a livelihood.
Hmm.
If the modern systems are so good, everyone is very concerned that if a child is going to study in the Gurukul, what he or she is going to do afterwards for a living. Versus as if, the modern system is really kind of guaranteeing a jivika. If it is the case, then why do we have so many unemployed people? That means it is not
Yeah.
serving that purpose. If it is not even serving that basic purpose, do we really think that is really going to serve all kind of 6 areas of it? So this is something like as when we talk about Gurukul Shiksha Paddhati, this is something which is fully developed to cover all these aspects of it. And of course, we need to delve into each point in much more detail if you want to understand them better.
What is coming to my mind, like Anshuji, is about how the whole design of a Gurukula is actually very student centric, student at the center, and everything is done depending on the capability, the progress, and the speed, as you mentioned, of the student. So everything is designed to suit the particular child and their growth. That was very, very interesting. Actually, that is, I would say, the most important difference to what we have today as the education system, because it's the same approach for everybody, irrespective of where they are in whatever subject. And um, that's something to really ponder upon. And it seems very obvious, yet there is so much resistance to change, right?
Yeah.
So that's the sad part. But uh, moving on, I think what you also then brought to light is the Pancha Koshiatmika. So I think that is something very important and also unique to our Paddhati.
Yes.
So if you can shed some more light on each of the koshas, and as you mentioned, the subjects change depending on which kosha needs to be developed and the age at which various koshas have to be developed. My fundamental question is, let's say a child of 10 years, do we have to focus on all the koshas, or is there any specificity and ordering and structure to this? More of it if you can share on these.
So actually,
Yeah.
there are two sides to it, or I would share two dimensions of it. One is, of course, how the koshas develop and accordingly what changes. And their parents also, of course, have a very big role to play in the modern times because it's not kind of, the child is not staying with the gurus only.
Yeah.
And the second one is, I spoke about the Deshakal. You wanted to know a bit about
Yes.
the routine or, kind of the
Correct.
overall schedule in a Gurukul, how that actually builds into the Panchakosha, and how Panchakosha builds into that. So
Hmm.
the very first one is that there are actually so the five koshas that we have, they are gradually subtler. So the most gross is the Annamaya Kosh, which
Hmm.
is the body that we see, and not just the outer body. All the components of the body are the
Hmm.
Annamaya Kosha, which is our
Right.
organs, our internal organs, and
Yeah.
our stool brain, our gross brain. The muscle
Hmm.
basically, the gray matter, everything, all our karmendriyas and the expositions of our Gyanendriyas. That is
Hmm.
something which is the Annamaya Kosha. So the Annamaya Kosha is something, so a human has all five koshas.
Hmm.
Right? So there is also a science on basically there are, Ek-koshiya jivas, there are Dvikoshiya jivas, Trikoshiya jivas and so on. We'll talk about that some other time. But the human has all five koshas. So the Annamaya Kosha develops the most from birth to 5 years of age.
Okay.
And that is a time. And by the way, the same process also happens in the Garbha. In Garbha
Hmm.
also, these five koshas develop sequentially. And that is the reason we also see the changes in the mother,
Ah.
in her this thing. According to that, her diet, her vyavahar, her routine has to change because as the kosha is progressing, you are supposed to feed to every kosha. That is
Hmm.
one way. And after the child is born, from birth to 5 years of age is when the Annamaya Kosha develops the most. So by Annamaya Kosha, what is mean? That is the body is building. It is, there is a huge kapha pradhanata in the body because it is
Hmm.
kind of, building in. So there is a very innate need for consuming, for
Ah.
taking in. And you would see that as a Lakshana as well. If you give anything to a child, the child is going to take it to the mouth. Whether it is
Yeah.
actually food or it is a flower or it is a toy or even something which is very might be bitter for you, you know that the child would actually try to take it to the mouth.
Yeah.
For that matter, even if the child catches hold of a small insect, the child will try to eat
Correct.
it. Right? Because
Yeah.
that is the innate need. That is
Ah.
how the nature has built that everything will
Very
be
interesting.
consumed. So there is the diet which is very kind of becomes very important. And
Hmm.
at the same time, and it is so not that all the koshas are not developing, but the most of development, of the
Ah.
Annamaya kosha happens, and the other koshas are yet to be. They're in a very dormant stage and a very
Dormant
nascent
stage.
stage.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
for example, these now because there is a need to consume. or rather intake, because the Annamaya Kosha is developing. At the same time, there is a need for, for abhivyakti. So, so whenever, for example, that is the reason it is said now in the modern researches, they say, of course, you can teach as many languages as you want, to a child who is probably less than 5 years old, which is actually very true. One, because there's a need to consume. So the child would, of course, consume. And because that is also the time for abhivyakti, for expression to develop, the nature, makes it conducive for the child to be able to basically grasp everything which will help the child to express. So that is the reason when we say that you teach more than one languages or as many languages, the child grasps. You do not teach the grammar, you do not teach the structure of the, of a language, but the child still picks up and starts speaking correctly by the age of 4 or 5 years. Like initially only the words and so, but so we never taught them, the order of grammar. We never taught them the vocabulary per se, but the Sahaj Shiksha way, and because that is an innate need, that is the time the child learns them. Now, between 6 and 12 years, so the idea is from from a Shiksha perspective, Shiksha, I'm not talking about literacy. From a Shiksha perspective, what is it that is supposed to be given to the child so that that development continues and that development is optimized? That's what for example, the Sahaj Shiksha comes in very handy. One, because mother is in the best position to give that education to the child. That is the reason this entire concept of preschools is something which is, frankly speaking, detrimental to the growth of the child. And we can, it needs a separate session to talk about this entire aspect, but that is something which is, that's why mother becomes the most important person. And because it is a time the child is consuming with the mother, there's a very innate relationship that the child has with the biological mother. Whatever the mother is giving, the child takes in completely. And that is when the child kind of, learns the most. So along with the diet, and then what is the kind of diet you're supposed to feed to the child? Whatever is not detrimental to the growth is what you're not supposed to, what you're supposed to feed to the child. Whatever is detrimental, you're not supposed to feed to the child. So Aahara has a very important aspect, in Shiksha. So unless a mother is educated in the or whosoever is feeding the child is educated into what needs to be fed into the science of Aahara, how would the mother actually know what is the right thing to feed? So then otherwise there'll be a dependency for an entire system that some expert will come and tell the child about it. So that is the independent, that is the Swavalamban, which is part of our Bharatiya Shiksha or Sahaj Shiksha. Coming on to the next one, which is the Pranamaya Kosha, which actually develops the most from the age of 6 to 10 years. Pranamaya Kosha, by prana we mean is the vital energy. All kind of balas and the activity, Kriya Shilta, Kriya Shakti is developing at its peak during 6 to 10 years of age. Now, that is where, again, from an education perspective, that is where the modern education system becomes a detriment itself. How? By that time, the formal education starts and child is supposed to sit 4 to 5 hours in the school. One lecture after the other, one period after the other, very small breaks in between. The child is expected to sit, and that is not the age to sit. Because the Kriya Shakti is so, the body is asking for Kriya Shakti, and if that is not given to the child, what happens? That innate inertia builds in. Alasya, something, a pramad is something which builds into the child to the extent that when the child grows up and becomes an adult, that is the time when that displays that lack of prana shakti is there. And a very unfortunate and a very recent example you would have seen, I think yesterday, there's another man who has committed suicide. There is, of course, there's a whole investigation going on whether who was right, who was wrong. So the idea when, and there was, a few months back, there was another case of, I think this Subhash, there's another guy, was from Bangalore who had committed suicide, who had, kind of written a very, very chronological and everything, who was genuinely a very, a very disturbing case. But you see this, the person who was actually really passed away yesterday, not that what that person did, or basically taking your own life, where is something, or feeling weak and then immediately trying to kind of, the only solution you look for is that is a lack of the bala, lack of the atma bala, which leads to the fact that is when you give up this fight. So, and time to actually develop that atma bala or all kinds of balas is 6 to 10 years of age. That is when the pranamaya kosh is developing the most. So from a modern education system, that is a time, if your that is a time for experiential learning, when we say, which is the kinesthetic way of learning. So it is not that only, some kids are kinesthetic learners, some are this learners, some are that learners. That age itself, 6 to 10 years, is the age when actually teaching through activity is something which is gonna really, work the best way. So
Super.
that is the Pranamaya Kosha time. From 11 to 15 years of age is where the Manomaya Kosha, or the mind, develops the most. That is when the Avirbhav, or that is when the emotions actually start to develop. That is a time for the hormones to build. So at the bodily level also, there are changes in both, male and female. And the girls have a bigger change that comes in. Then they start menstruating, they become Rajaswala. So that, and then from there, the life changes, the way of teaching changes, the way of life changes for male and female. And that again, in the modern system, we are not doing it. We are forcing both of them to have exactly the same lifestyle, routine, everything, which is rather becoming detrimental, where you gradually see the overall health of a woman declining. So that is one aspect of it. So at that time, the emotions, and how do emotions generate? From a modern perspective now, there are electrodes and hormones, right, which when secrete as when the emotions actually, which is essentially an electrode, which actually develops. So that is a time when the Manomaya Kosha is developing. So everything which has to be done, that is the time for company. So from an education perspective also, that is a time to give good company to the child, which is good company at the level of, books and sahityas. That is when you introduce the easier and the bigger aspect of it. That is when you introduce literature, when the child starts to independently start learning certain things. By the age of 10 years, the family is the world. But at the most, a very, few close friends and so. Even in schools, the attachments are not like that. If all of us, if we go back to our lives and try and see, most of the friends that we have are from the age group of 11 to 15 years. Because that is when the innate requirement or the feeling of sanidhya starts developing. Because the emotion coming, that is when the child gets exposed to the outer world, only exposed partially. So what happens at that time when the child is getting exposed, the job of the teachers and the job of the parents is to ensure they're channelizing the right things into the child. And that is why Sat Sahitya, the Sat Sangati, it is very important. And that is something which is actually happening to the children right now in that age group. The exposure to the digital media, the unhindered exposure to the digital media, YouTube and all those things is what is leading to lot of vikaras, lot of vikritis in the manas of children, which also exponentially grows on, once they become adults. That is the reason, this is the time for giving all the good things and be very involved, start engaging, having the samvada with this thing. Now imagine in the modern system, on a class, when the child is in this age, average class size is about 30 kids.
Yes.
Plus.
Yeah.
That is a time of samvada. A teacher is coming in. A teacher, imagine a situation. There's a teacher who's menstruating, who's Rajaswala. She is supposed to be resting, but she's supposed to come to the class, stand for the entire day, because that's how those private schools are run these days. The teachers are not allowed to sit. They're not supposed to sit in the class. They're supposed to stand and give their lectures and teach. So there's one such teacher, and there are 30 kids. Is it possible? And there is a 45-minute time, because 8 subjects are supposed to be taught, or 4, 5, 6 subjects are supposed to be taught. So it only has 45 minutes. Do you think there is a possibility there's a time for samvada? There is no time for samvada. And that is a time when, in modern times, parents already start, oh, this is what we want to make our child. They do not try to recognize their innate capability, something which is coming in, what is their interest area, and they start prepping them up for further things. So once they come back from the school is when the time of tuitions start. And then the child has to be a master at every sport. So they will go for the skating class, they'll go for the football class, they'll go for whatever classes. There is no time for samvada. So that is something which is not developing. The child later on becomes very unsocial when a person becomes an adult. And then comes the age of 16 to 20 years. That is where it is the idle centric, which is the Maitri Pradhan time, where the Vijnanamaya Kosha, the Tarka is developing. That is when the time when there is a lot of questions when coming. That is the time when the knowledge part comes into picture, not at the PG stage. This is the time when the right arguments are supposed to be provided. The questions need to be answered in the right fashion, so that the direction of the life further ahead stays in whatever way you want. So
Hmm.
if you recollect that around 20 20 years of age, and 21 to 25 is the time for the Anandamaya Kosha to develop, which is generally we make a silo and associate it to Adhyatma. But
Yeah.
Adhyatma is not something which actually develops, at the age of, or needs to be imparted from 21 years of age, or something which is left for retirement age. It is something which is encompassing, our entire, Bharatiya
Journey.
Shiksha. So,
Yeah.
but that is a time to develop it the most. So that is where, all kind of yoga comes into picture. That is a time for to explore to from Deshatana Paddhati to go and meet and imbibe the aspects, the new aspects. And this is the age when the final skill development, basically being ready for start to earn a livelihood, is something which is there. So in Bharat or in the Gurukul education system, the age of finishing education or studies is 25 years, not at the so-called the graduation level. And it is different
Hmm.
for girls and boys because girls mature early. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that we, in women, in the 10th Adhyaya, in the Vibhuti Yoga, he says where all he is present in every being or in every padartha and every tattva. So say in the Stri, I am the Buddhi. He is the
Hmm.
Dhi, is the Smriti in women. They actually mature early. That is the reason there's always a difference which is recommended between the age difference. The
Oh.
man is, or the male is supposed to be, or the groom is supposed to be of a higher age. So imagine 25 years till 25 years age is when the child is studying, or when a man is studying, and the woman kind of usually stops at 18, 19. And or the age is so. Because the woman matures early, and if at that is the gap, that is when both of them would be at the same mental level. And the
Hmm.
Gurukula Shiksha, the Gurukul system talks about that, because at the graduation ceremony, when the Gurukula and Taittiriya Upanishad, that's when you have that in Shiksha Valis, when the child or when the student is actually going away. I told you one assessment way of Nagarjuna. That
Yes.
is to check from his knowledge perspective. But when they part, that is when the Guru provides some vachana, or rather takes some vachana from the Shishya. Satyam Vada Dharmanchara. So
Hmm.
Adhyayama Ma Pramadaha. And then he says, then you are supposed to give alimony to me, get the Acharya, the Dhanam, the Artha, which is essentially the alimony. That means continue supporting the Gurukul, and also do not shy away from, or basically do not break the Prajatantu. That means do not, you get married and then have a santan.
Right.
This is a graduation ceremony. Compare it to the modern graduation ceremony, where you get dressed in black robes in the modern way, this thing, and you throw off your, your hats
Hat.
and
Yeah.
whatever it is. So this is a very contrasting difference. So when we say that why there is a need, why do we need to talk about this, or what is the aspect of Panchakoshatmak Vikas? Because it is all encompassing. So here
Hmm.
in the modern system, we only continue to focus on academics. We keep on adding more subjects or add more elaborate details of a particular subject. And that's how we kind of keep compounding. Versus in the Gurukul education system, it is so that according to the age, one is that you do, make the studies this way. The second aspect that you asked a question about, we'll very quickly touch upon that, is that the methods of teaching change.
Hmm.
So in the 6 to 10 years of age, when the prana shakti is getting developed, there's a lot of energy inside the body. And
Yeah.
as you would know, from if we go a little deep into the, Patanjali Yoga Sutra, and rather in the Vedanta Gyan, is that actually when you speak, there is a lot of energy that we consume. So
Hmm.
every time we speak, there is a, the vayu which goes out of our body is actually a maranam. It's
Hmm.
the depletion of prana. So that is energy. So that is the time to contain that energy, or if what the child does, and still the Annamaya Kosha is getting developed, though not at the fastest speed, but it's getting developed. That is the time to, for the abhyasam. So that is
Hmm.
when you recite.
Yeah.
That is when you learn. So what we call the ratta, right? So you
Yes.
learn the Upanishads, you learn the Stotras, you learn the Ashtadhyaya, you learn the Vyakarams. You learn to some bit and then you cram up a bit. So
Yeah.
learning the tables is not something, oh, you need not learn a table because now you have Vedic mathematics to tell you how to draw a 9 ka table. You still need to learn 20 up to 20 tables, and you can do it faster. So that is a time when it is learned. The very first thing which is taught for a longer time without any other subject coming into picture is language. So if we say Sanskritam, so for 2 years it is only Sanskritam, and very fundamental other things is being taught. Because when the ground of the language would be strong, when the abhivyakti would be strong, that is when you will be able to understand the other subjects which will come your way. And at the age of 11 to 15 years is when the Manomaya Kosha is getting developed. That is when you introduce Sahitya. Because for Sahitya, for example, if there is a sentence, if there's a poem written, to be able to actually understand and connect to that poem, you need to have the Manomaya Kosha developed. So if you tell Abhigyana Shakundalam will not have any rasa for a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old.
Yes.
But an 11-year-old, if you give that, that book, and if the person, let's say, has learned Sanskritam and is sitting and reading that, the immersiveness and let's say Bhagavatam is given to the person. So the entire Purana, the Ithas and Purana are introduced at that age.
Yeah, okay.
You read about that, you get into the Sangati, that is how you teach, and that is a time when the story aspect of it, the entire Bharatiya knowledge is, you being a storyteller yourself, Shreyariji, you realize that the most important, the unique baton of knowledge that India has is the storytelling science and art. And it is not just various ways of storytelling. There are, the storytelling itself changes. The stories itself change. How you, engage using the story, something will change. And at the same time, the Paddhatis. For example, there are 26, Vedic Paddhatis of teaching. For example, what you call of known to unknown, lot of consulting trainings, very expensive trainings these days talk about all these things, but they are essentially all Vedic Paddhatis. There are 26 of them, which are still present. A lot of them have got Lupta as well. So Tadvit Sambhash or a seminar is something which is the oldest, one of the oldest Paddhatis that Bharat has.
Wow.
There's something you would find in Charak Samhita, right? The very first, so in Sutra Sthanam, it is a
Correct.
Rishi Parishad. What is a Rishi Parishad? It is a seminar of Vidwans who are coming together. There is also
Exactly.
a minutes taker who is actually the, the entire Charak Parampara, Charaivati, and they write. They learn that practice of writing there, and then they move on and they write and document everything. That's how you have the Charak Samhita coming up. So like this, which is the right path? That so Samvad Paddhati, storytelling Paddhati, Swairakatha Paddhati is what you adopt at the age of 11 to 15 years. And then in the 16 to 20 years of age is where the Deshatana Paddhati takes precedence, which is complete experiential learning, where you go to a place, not just learn about what is at that place. For example, if someone went to Mahakumbh in that age group, now 16 to 20 years, they would have grasped so many things, not just the fact that what is Mahakumbha, what is the nakshatra state, and why do you take a dip. What they would have learned about the entire civilization at that point in time would have been strongest for those people. So that is how this Panchakosha aspect comes into picture. And because after this time, it is usually the time to move out of the Gurukula. One important thing which I will kind of use to wrap up this Panchakosha, this thing, is to associate with Dinacharya. For example, the knowledge of Panchakosha, why is it important? And why all the Gurus and Acharyas used to necessarily have the complete understanding, that is when one becomes an Acharya, is at what time, what do you teach? So because every kosha has a Jagrata time. So your buddhi is most active in the Brahma Muhurta. So the subjects of which need a lot of, intellectual capability are taught or read in the morning, which is Brahma Muhurta and your first Kal. The Apaharan Kal is something which is further where the Pranamaya Kosha is the most active. And that is when you do the activities which are which needs your physical applied involvement. So whether it is maths or it is doing activity-based learning or it is Nritya for that matter, Sangeet, that is the time for that. Evening time is, that is the Annamaya Kosha time. And then the evening is the Pranamaya Kosha time. That is where the sports and Anandamaya Kosha and both of them actually kind of are most active at that time, because it is a time of the Sandhya, it is a time of the Yugma.
Right.
At the time of the Yugma is when the Sushumna Nadi is most active. What is the Sushumna Nadi for? It is also called the Saraswati Nadi, which is when you are most awake, most, your bala is most pravutta. That is a time which is a time for sports, learn through sports, or which is the physical activities. And then the night time is the time for Manoranjan, which is the Manomaya Kosh is most active. When you do the Manoranjana, when you do the right stories, when you do the right sabha within that, you sleep with that thought and your subconscious
Exactly.
works on that the entire night.
Yeah.
So that is how basically this knowledge, why this is important versus what you have in the modern education system. There is absolutely no, it doesn't have any place in that. There is no knowledge of that. Forget about applying it over. So the most of the kids sleep late,
Yeah.
and that's why they get up late. So the entire Brahmurta is gone.
In fact, these days, schools have this morning shift, afternoon shift.
Yes.
And kids in the afternoon shift reach home late around 6 o'clock until 6 p.m. They're at school. After going home, there is no way they can play any sport or anything because their friends probably are already done playing in their community or in their apartment. And then they then go to their tuition or other classes directly. And then they come back completely swamped, tired, right? With no energy left. But then they eat also late because the parents also are designing their whole schedule around the child. And because of eating late, the child is again active until late in the night. And then the child is waking up very late the next day. I mean, the whole design of then the schooling itself is then becoming actually impeding. It's causing an impediment in the growth of the child,
That is
frankly
very true.
speaking.
Very true.
Yeah.
And that is the reason this need of Gurukul education or the
Mm,
Gurukul based Paddhati is becoming more eminent. So,
true.
sometimes we think that, because it is mainstream, it is so widespread, it's just not possible for us to, I don't know, kind of, change it. So what should we do about it?
Yeah. Yeah.
There are two sides to it. One is that we keep sitting, keep consuming what is coming our way and continue to have the deterioration, that patan, or
Yeah.
to start kind of basically a multi-prong approach to bring
Mm,
these aspects into this thing. Unfortunately, the way the modern system is built up, you do not have too many options to change it or mold it.
yeah.
So the idea is that you kind of, one, you start creating this, not just the awareness, the practice actually happens and spreads at the societal level. For example, the
Mm,
parents. So because as we spoke about the Gurukul Shiksha, it is not just about the teacher or the school or the Gurukula. It is the entire family. It is the society. Everything, all encompassing environment has to become Gurukul-like,
yes.
because we cannot
Yes.
really have that kind of a system. So one aspect is that. The second is to also start developing the Gurukulas from scratch, where the child is right from beginning is studying in there. And the third way is to kind of, do like a multi-level approach where you start ingesting things, not as a
Mm,
discipline, of course, but that's something unfortunately we see that IKS is being looked at as a discipline,
yeah.
which is not, I don't think so. This is something which is a very good thing to happen, because then, for example, if someone picks up, just like someone picks up sociology or political science or
Yeah.
engineering, then you pick up IKS. So again, IKS becomes a profession. It is not right, because if you really want to have so many acharyas, if you want to take everyone an acharya, it is not possible to do it that way. And the most important part is that any acharya or any teacher, for example, currently in the discipline system, a psychologist is not something who can be also a darshanacharya,
Correct.
right? Versus on the same way, for example, there's a mathematician who would not know Ayurveda.
Yeah.
Acharyas are not like that. The Bharatiya Shiksha is interdisciplinary because all the
Yes.
fundamentals are common across everywhere. So that
Mm,
is, which is something which needs to spread. Unless it so happens, it'll remain a discipline, just like,
yeah.
someone is a psychologist, then they complete their education, and then they look for a job of a counselor somewhere, or they start counseling on their own, but they cannot do
True.
anything beyond that. What is the kind of jivika a Gurukul trained person would have? So that is, I think, also the answer to that question also lies here.
Absolutely. And I think it is a good point where we take a pause in this conversation. And I think we have covered a very good base with respect to Gurukula Paddhati. And I also feel that it calls for another conversation to
Mhm.
discuss this whole, like how you said, no, the roadmap ahead. It'll be very interesting to get your thoughts and perspectives on this, and also some of the work that Brahmavarcha is already doing. Maybe if you could share a little before we end this conversation for the audience to be benefited and also visit.
This
Yeah.
topic is so huge that it's very difficult to remain, precise and, keep everything in a summary level. So, and that is what we are trying to do at Brahmavarchas essentially, because the attention spans are not expanding. They are actually, their sankunchan is happening. And at the same time, the business is increasing, and there are actually physical limitations for people to
Yeah.
come and have dedicated studies and study like that. So that's why at Brahmavarchas, what we do in the very first phase, what we are doing is that we have come up with a knowledge portal where all these subjects and all these knowledge pieces, we call them the knowledge capsules or the Jnana portals, is we bring in form of courses. Courses does not mean you sit and listen to a lecture or so, but it is like, audio-visual courses. Essentially knowledge capsules which are self-paced, you can do at your this thing age, where the things or the topics or the subjects which are not taught in schools and in colleges is something that we try to bring forward. For example, parenting. Vedic parenting or Rajaswala Paricharya, fundamental things of of life, which is trying to make a Gurukul-like environment in every home. That is the intention. Because half of your home's environment should be like that of a Gurukula if you want your child to study in a Gurukula. It's as simple as that. That's how Guruma puts it. So that is something we are bringing forward. And especially with reference to the Gurukul Shiksha also, we spoke about a lot of things. So Sanskriti Arya Gurukulam, we call ourselves an offshoot of Sanskriti Arya Gurukulam, is a Rishi Parampara Adharit Gurukulam, currently based in Rajkot, Gujarat. And there, the founder of the Gurukul, Pandit Vishwanath Dadar Shastri ji, has actually put together a lot of frameworks on how this entire Gurukul education is something which you can do along with the subjects. They are not just content, right? I think unfortunately we start calling these words, using these terms, content for it. The how and what needs to be taught in what fashion for how long, so that the the Gurukul Paddhati can kind of get revived. So for that, there is also a book that Acharya Mehulbai has actually written, has penned, and it is available in form of an ebook, because what we have on our knowledge portal, everything is in form of e-learning. There's an ebook which is also available. So if someone wants, they can go there and check that out. We'll be soon publishing an English version as well. And that is something what we do. And of course, going on a lot of offline programs and workshops also that we also organize, because under the guidance of Acharya Mehulbai, who's the current Pradhanacharya of Gurukulam. It is the idea, our mission is to make Vedic education mainstream. And that is what we strive for. And with the, I would say, folks like yourself joining hands, I think we're going to reach it in our lifetime only. I'm very positive about it.